Recently, the federal government had an agreement with the National Union of Electricity Employees saying that they should give them 60 days grace for them to actually yield to the demands of the workers in terms of the welfare of workers in the sector. Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. We will be right back. According to research, young people under 25 years of age, making up 60% of Africa's population, are unemployed. It is in this light of this that the African Region meeting, which held in Abidjan recently, led to the declaration of advancing social justice and shaping the future of work on the continent. The International Labour Organization wants member states of the Ajaero to develop a human-centered approach to the future of work.
Let us know that if we do not fundamentally have a shift, the number of unemployed people in Africa will increase from 34.1 million this year to 34.8 million.
Job creation must be taken down from PowerPoint presentation in beautiful summits like this and taken to the corridors of effective public policy making to achieving the desired results.
At the 6th African Social Summit, which is ongoing in Lagos, Nigeria, and will continue tomorrow, it was agreed that Africa is yet to deliver on socio-economic development. Thus, what is essential for Africa to do right now is to create more jobs to ensure that many people have decent work and more livelihood for all. Minister of Labour Chris Ngige re-emphasized the need for improved skills in technology.
The essence being that we want to create new entrepreneurs so that they can employ themselves and also employ others.
The Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association believes that government needs to create the enabling environment for industries to thrive.
The infrastructural deficit in the environment is huge and colossal. Of course, the access to credit issue is also there, and so on and so forth. So, government policy is very critical. And once these policies are instituted, government should ensure that there are no reversals.
Findings show that no fewer than 1 million young people in Africa enter the job market monthly, with the continent's working population growing by 18 million jobs, 80% of which are in the informal sector. Even more challenging is the revelation that out of the 73 million jobs created in the past few years in Africa, only about 16 million jobs were grabbed by young people. I took the journey to visit the home of Felicia Olaleye, a resident of Lagos. She tells me she is yet to enjoy power supply for more than 72 hours. She laments that unlike other neighbors, she does not have a generator set as alternative.
There is no light. Look at my fridge also. I've emptied everything there, my stew, my boiled pepper and other fresh pepper that I kept there. We don't normally have light. It's always on and off. For us to charge our phone is not easy.
We don't have lights, so paying an exorbitant bill is more or less like extortion. It's more or less like extorting the individual that uses the light.
We don't regularly have power supply, not like other countries whereby you can have regular power supply 24 hours.
Aliyu Tiamiu, a radionic who wants government and relevant stakeholders to intervene. He says he and his colleagues depend on 3 generator sets for power.
The money when they pay here, I know they even say I'm for my job. That's why I'm not using the light again.
I don't enjoy enough power supply. Out of 30 days, maybe I enjoyed light for 13 days, and they charged me 30,000 naira. Thus, I decided not to use public power supply, but provide my own electricity.
Some of the grievances of the National Union of Electricity Employees bordered on non-payment of gratuity to over 2,000 disengaged workers. They are also angered by the underpayment of severance package to 50,000 former staff of Power Holding Company of Nigeria (PHCN) and illegal transfer of schools built by the union to investors. On the profile interview segment this week, I will be speaking with the General Secretary of the Nigerian Union of Electricity Employees, Comrade Joe Ajaero, explained why the union decided to shelve the planned industrial action the union proposed recently. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
A lot has happened since the nationwide blackouts that Nigerians experienced late December. And earlier this year, you gave an ultimatum, which is 14-day ultimatum for the government to yield to the demands of workers in your sector. Can you tell us what's the update as regards the necessary government agencies yielding to the plight of the welfare of workers in your sector?
Well, based on the ultimatum we gave principally on two major issues, the issue of harassment and intimidation by the Minister of State Power and non-implementation of the agreement, which is at the December 10th meeting following the industrial action embarked upon by the National Union of Electricity Employees. A meeting was called at the instance of the Minister of Labour, where Minister of Power was represented by their PAM Secretary, DG, BPE, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, and the Minister of Labour and his team. After a closed-door meeting of over 4 hours, there was some understanding. The government asked for 60 days to implement the demands. Some of the demands include 7.5% of pension deductions for 16 months, and then the gratuity component of the 16 months that were not calculated during the privatization exercise. But the government representatives were still foot dragging, that we should please consider them on the 16 months, for which we explained to them that those 16 months are workers' monies. You can't, on the other way, agree to pay 7.5 pension deduction, and the severance component or the gratuity component, you refuse to pay it. So we were clear about it. And then the issue of schools built by the unions, they say if they had evidence, and the evidence is, and we told them, well, if they are looking at as in C of O or whatever, those were in PSCN premises, you can't get a C of O within the PSCN premises. But there were evidence, which we used to hand over the schools to management to be running while we do the business of unionism. And there were evidence of even deductions from salaries of workers for the construction of the school. And there was equal and evidence the case of Sapling, where the unions in 1981 transferred about $1 million, among other items, to the PTA and the school and the PSM management to be running while we concentrate on. So evidence abound. And in the case of Afam Power Station, the school is still jointly run, by the management union committee. So those are some of the issues that we discussed, and we are waiting for 60 days. But if you ask me, government as usual will still not do anything in 60 days, although the BPE just sent a letter that they want to meet with the union representatives to find out some of the people they have conducted biometrics on. And it's so painful that 7 years after, we are still talking of biometrics, and some of the people that are deceased, their next of kin are yet to receive any money. So if you ask me, nothing is happening, and in fact there was an exchange of words between the Office of the Accountant General who seem to be saying that they have not received the list of people that BPE said they have sent. So those were the issues, those were the confusion within and amongst government agencies. On the issue of deduction of pension and non-remittance, on some discourse, the BPE DG told us that they said they have complied, but a report available to us shows that Kano, Kaduna, Jos are in arrears of over 1, 2, 3 years, and one wouldn't know why the DG of BPE should come before such a meeting to say they told him that they have complied.
So, but why is it that we have most organizations finding it difficult to actually ensure that they remit pension that they actually deduct from workers' salaries? Why is this probably a trend in most organizations?
Well, I think most of those organizations are private sector organizations, most of them, and their motive is profit. To them, if they warehouse workers' pension somewhere and fix it and they collect interest on it, when you harass them, they can still release it if you give them enough harassment. But if not, they would even decide not to remit. It shouldn't bother you. It shouldn't be a surprise to you, because before now, most organizations don't pay pension. So it is in the same line. To them, anything goes. And for a government like ours, you come up to make a law and you say somebody's salary should be deducted as part of the pension, and you can't enforce it, you can't implement it. That's the irony. Laws that are not enforceable and that cannot be implemented.
So what form of engagement would you be having with the government and its relevant agencies in terms of ensuring that when the 60 days elapse, probably these workers would have probably gotten what is due to them?
Well, we will try to assist them by not going to sleep, by still asking them that, it's remaining 30 days, it's remaining 20 days. Where are this money? Do we take it to the Accountant General's office? Is it in BPE office? Is it with the Ministry of Power? So we'll try to do a bit of monitoring, and follow up, But you see, from all indications, the 60 days may turn out to be a gimmick. But we are not joking on this. The country should hold the people in authority responsible if they fail. Those of them that will remember that power is essential services should remember it now.
And talking about power being an essential services, it's a well-known truth that across the world that if there is steady power supply in the country, there's this possibility of more jobs being created both in the formal and informal sector. What's your take on this?
Well, that is if there is steady power supply. And it's not like let there be power. You have to work towards steady power supply. And then the question is, have we worked towards steady power supply? Because steady power supply, like you said, drives industrialization. Is an engine of development. A lot revolves around steady power supply. And then for you to have steady power supply, the state works assiduously to ensure that. But what we saw was a situation whereby the states now say it is not our responsibility. It is the duty of the private sector to generate, distribute, and transmit electricity. And that is why you are seeing a kind of static sector. From 2013, when the so-called privatization took place, we are still on less than 4,000 megawatts. So you can't have a steady power supply if there's no conscious effort, to work towards it. As at today, ask the operators of the Nigerian power sector, what is their plan, what is their short-term objective, what is their medium-term objective, and what is the long-term objective in terms of, power generation, distribution, and transmission. I think it's important that some of them should come up to tell Nigerians, because running a system, without planning, seems to be the greatest problem. As of today, the Nigerian power sector, the operators are not telling us that they are going to add even 1,000 megawatts in the next 1 or 2 years.
But there's always been this talk of proposed increase in tariff. How do you juxtapose this?
Yeah, that was the aim of privatization. Privatization was to create money, you know, for the would-be investors, as the case may be, and it's doing exactly that. You know, if you ask them now, they will tell you that they are working towards cost-reflective tariff, you know, but nobody is working towards service-reflective tariff. You know, so we have to match the two. You know, there's nobody that is telling you that by December this year that they are completing one power plant. Nobody is telling you that even the 4,000 being generated, that the distribution networks will be able, you know, to carry it. Nobody is working towards that. So it's like, you know, everybody move to different direction. Unless it is coordinated, even the little we have won't be able to convey it to the end user.
What would be your solution to this challenge posed at us?
Well, we are tired of talking. You know, there is need, instead of setting up, there is need for Nigerians to discuss. You know, there's need for a national dialogue on how to fix the power sector. Very important. You know, and if we don't do this, we'll continue to wumble and fumble. You know, we need to find out what is the expected capacity for this country. How do we achieve it? What are areas of strength? You know, what do we have in the country? Is it hydro? Is it solar? Is it thermal? So whichever, we need to discuss it. We need to give ourselves timeline. Who funds it? Can the private sector fund electricity generation in the country? We need to ask those questions. You know, and at what return on investment are they supposed to fund it? So unless we do this, and we need to have a conscious master plan, you know, that in the first 4 years or in the first 3 years, we're going to have about 500 megawatts, sustainable. And that what we have now should be constant. You know, if we should be able to sustain 4,000 megawatts until another 500 joins it. Because if we are generating 4,000 megawatts in the next 3 years, and then we are moving from 4,000 megawatts to 2,000 megawatts, in the next 3 years we'll be on 2,500 megawatts. So that is not development. That has nothing to do with planning. So we should be able to sustain what we have now while expecting more energy to enter the national grid. We must equally look at the issue of going off grid, you know, having embedded generation. If we generate 20 megawatts in a Otukpo, we should be able to distribute it without insisting that it should go to national grid. You know, so all those small generating stations, either turbine or whatever, we install them, you know, and that will reduce the pressure on what is going to the national grid. If we do that, that will be okay for the country.
The Electricity Consumer Group opposed recently the 12 trillion bailout fund that the GENCOs and DISCOs are actually requesting from the federal government. At this point in time, whereby many Nigerians are not enjoying electricity supply, is this the time of what use or of what need will be a 12 trillion naira bailout fund?
You can see that all this is a scam. You know, I was among the few Nigerians, if not the arrowhead, on the opposition to privatization, citing these examples. And government came up with the idea that the private sector, that they have money, and government has no business in business. Now, the whole essence of telling us that the private sector have money has been defeated. You can see that the whole essence of privatization was based on falsehood. You know, they will bring their fund, there will be foreign direct investment, they promised us, there will be technical competence, managerial ability, all those things are false.
So which one have you experienced in the sector?
Well, what we're experiencing is give us Bella. It then means the private sector, they don't have money, they depend on government. Now you ask yourself, Has government spent 12 trillion since the power sector has been there? Have they spent 1 trillion on the 10 PS yet? Even for a period of 10 years. But for the first period of 4 or 5 years, government has spent over 1.5 trillion to these same people. You see that the investors in the power sector are a kind of parasitic group that are there to milk the sector and the country. And then the issue is that aside today, nobody has been able to list out the names of the investors and who owns what. So you see a situation whereby we don't even know the direction we are going. We don't know the owners of this company. We don't know whether it is those in government or those that are out of government. And they are now saying there's one pit there, put in 12 trillion, just put in there. It was with 12 trillion fresh money, Nigeria will have over 100,000 megawatts. So why give it to them? Why give them 12 trillion?
So are you saying that Nigeria is actually due to have a review of the activities of the GENCOs and DISCOs?
Well, I don't even think that there's the activities of GENCOs and DISCOs has been to collect money from Nigerians. There's no activity that I have noticed, if you ask me. From that day it was handed over to them, they started hitting millions. That day, people were paying their bill. The ones that people were owing before, they went and paid to them, billions, millions. Meanwhile, the sector was given to them, without any liability. No liability, whether employee liability or any kind of liability. So that first day they are collecting their certificate, their accounts were hitting million. So since that time it has been collect money. If you check the transformers all over, part of the problem we're having now with the DISCOs is because the transformers are obsolete. They are not changing any transformer. They are not doing any new thing. They moved in to create more problem by sacking workers, creating more liability to the Nigerian state. Now, if PSN was even working and was keeping jobs of Nigerians, even if it's 20 or 30,000 people, you say that is advantage to Nigerian state, assuming it was able to solve the problem of unemployment. But this one, they worsen the problem of unemployment, and they have been collecting money both from government and from Nigerians. So by increasing tariff on daily basis. So I have not seen any added advantage. And that is why when you talk of review, I really don't know what to review. But you see, the people talking about the Erufai committee, urging for review. Erufai was part of the problem. Erufai was chairman of DG of BPE, who started this process. And some of the people in the review committee, like Ajaero with him, are members of the committee, members of the BPE. And then they started the process. Before the process could conclude, they left. Ajaero went to NEC, Lanre went to NEC, Erufai went into business. And now they are thinking, they are coming together now to bring their own model of privatization, to change the ownership structure. I'm not among the Nigerians who are expecting that anything good could come out from that committee. Nothing. The committee is not made up of conscious Nigerians. It's not made up of patriotic Nigerians who have paid their dues in making sure that this country moves forward.
So if you know that a review is not the solution, what is the union proposing, or what has the union been able to propose to the government and to Nigerians at large?
Well, in the first instance, we have maintained it that the power sector in an underdeveloping country, mark my words, underdeveloping. Nigeria is not a developing country, it's underdeveloping. Of necessity, must be in the hands of the state. And the government disobeyed this. They didn't want to see it that way. And I want to see the economics, or those developmental economics, who will tell you that, the Nigerian state is due to have an individual who will build a power station for 4 years and then collect the money for 20 years. That person is not a Nigerian. It's not in Nigeria. Now, of all countries that I've tried to study their power sector development, you discover that it takes the state to ensure steady power supply before you now think of who manages it. But in Nigeria, they are telling you that the private sector will do that. And I'm saying that it is not possible. If you leave the power sector in Nigeria in the hands of the private individuals, parasitic investors who depend on government budget and government patronage to operate, if you leave it in their hands, we will remain on 4,000 megawatts. And Nigeria is already at the bottom of countries that suffer from power poverty. Upon all these ones you are hearing, this and that disco, this and that genco, is 4,000 megawatts. And one company can generate 4,000 megawatts and be a player in the market. We gave them the model of what is happening in NESCO in Jos. NESCO in Jos has been there since 1929, generating electricity, transmitting and distributing for Bukuru and some other areas. And they have their own tariff approved, and they are making profit. Every 2 years we negotiate for the workers there. So why can't we have this other private sector companies establish, generate and sell? Since we have a model since 1929 in this country, why must you take over what belongs to government and then only to be increasing tariff every other day? So it's not going to work that way. It will get to a level, that they'll be so powerful that if they say they are not generating, government will beg them, so, okay, generate, we're going to give you so trillion. That is where we are moving to. And that's the disadvantage of private monopoly.
Of course, it means that we need a mix of the private sector and the public sector to ensure that there's a healthy mix for the citizens at large. It was an interesting time I had with you.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember, labor creates wealth.